Hello, DawgNation, and welcome back to DawgNation at Large. I'm Kaylee Mansell with DawgNation insider Connor Riley. Connor, I know that you're on the screen right there, but do you happen to know what this is?
I'm guessing that's a receipt of some kind.
It is a receipt, but what the receipt is less important. What's most important is the receipts that I have at the moment. Roll it. I thought he was taking a selfie.
No, I'm not a selfie guy. There are no selfie guys out there.
I could go to your Instagram right now and totally prove that wrong. And look, that's exactly what I did. All three pulled off straight from Connor's Instagram. Connor, I'm really sorry I had to do this, but the opportunity was too perfect. But the facts are in front of us. You do take selfies, and that's okay.
I wouldn't necessarily classify those as selfies. I think selfie is a picture that you send to your friends. That is more me documenting what I am doing out in the world, and I don't necessarily have someone there to take a photograph of me.
I'm sorry. That's really confusing that you say that, because I actually heard a different answer from you.
Kaylee Mansell, Connor Riley, was wrong, and you were correct.
Fair enough.
I've been sitting on it for so long. You're taking it so well. I actually thought you might be mad at me, but my favorite words to hear are, "You're right." So.
You're right.
With that, this is DawgNation at Large.
It's the show for the new breed of Georgia Bulldog fan. This is DawgNation at Large with DawgNation insiders Connor Riley and Kaylee Mansell.
All right, DawgNation, this is DawgNation at Large, the show where even when I'm wrong, I'm usually most of the time right, or at least that's what they tell me to keep me happy. But this is what we have going on today's episode. We're going to go ahead and look to the future, stop talking about the past. We're going to touch on Georgia's upcoming game against Alabama. And then now, with Tate Ratledge out for quite some time, what happens with the offensive line? And then we'll do our staple meme machine. And then we've got another Connor Kaylee Showdown in store. And in light of recent events, it could get a little bit personal today. But let's start with this. One thing about Connor and I's show is that since we air on Thursdays, we rarely ever get to be the first people on DawgNation to talk about things. So we thought this would be a good time for us to go ahead and start previewing Alabama and stop talking about the Kentucky game. I mean, this is one of the most intense rivalries in all of college football. And next week when we hear Kirby Smart, he's likely to say that they're preparing for Alabama the same way that they prepare for any other game. But Connor, I think you and I both know that that's just simply not true.
Yeah, look, they're going to go out there and do all the coach speak stuff and try and downplay this game. But you talk to any player in this program, Carson Beck, Tate Ratledge, Micah Morris, Jalen Walker, who we're going to get to hear from shortly, they'll tell you that game last year against Alabama left them with a bad taste in their mouth. Jalen Walker in particular, those guys in that 2023 recruiting class, from doing the math right off the top of my head, or 2022 recruiting class rather, juniors in the program, guys who could potentially be in the NFL a year from now, Michael Williams, Malachi Starks, that's the only loss of their college career. And it came in a game when they were favored. They were expected to win. Very clearly didn't play their best game that day, and it got them beat, and it kept them from winning a third straight national title. And while they have said publicly that, not winning a national title didn't motivate them this past offseason, and I do believe that loss to Alabama in particular, I do think is something that this team is aware of and knows that, sure, the Kentucky game wasn't their best effort, but they have to absolutely go out there and play an A effort against Alabama this coming Saturday, the 28th.
I completely agree. I think even in this new era of college football where you technically can lose a game and still get into the playoffs, when I look at the schedule, this game for me is the absolute one game that we cannot lose. You cannot let a first-year SEC head coach and Kalen DeBoer in their first SEC matchup be the team that beats you. I'm not saying I think that's going to be the case, but in looking at this long stretch of tough away games that they're going to have, we can't lose this game because there's no Saban anymore. Even when we lost in the SEC championship, it was one of those things I feel like people didn't necessarily have bitter feelings towards, because it's like, okay, it's Nick Saban, someone who knows Kirby Smart better than anybody else in the entire country. Such a familiar foe. But this year, things are different. And so when I look at this game on the schedule, this is the one that I say to myself, things cannot go wrong. We have to get the job done in Tuscaloosa.
Yeah, first of all, we did not lose that game last year to Alabama. I did not play in that game. I would say, though, largely I agree with Kaylee in the sense that Georgia was 1-5 against Alabama when Nick Saban was the head coach there, and they had Kirby Smart on the opposing sidelines. I think that you can chalk maybe some of that up to Nick Saban being the greatest coach of the 21st century in college football and that aspect of it there. But I think if you lose this game to Kalen DeBoer, it mushrooms into a much bigger problem, and it gives Alabama some much-needed momentum moving forward in comparison to a program like Georgia, which compared to where Kalen DeBoer is just much more established and has its feet under it. And so I think on the wide level you have that. But even within the narrative of this season, look, Carson Beck hasn't played all that well, whereas Jalen Milroe has been a difference maker, specifically in that game against Wisconsin. And so, you hear so much chatter about Carson Beck being a Heisman Trophy finalist, a Heisman Trophy contender. Jalen Milroe goes out there and outplays Carson Beck. He's absolutely going to be a guy that gets a lot of the honors and accolades that we have sort of had earmarked for Carson Beck up to this point in the season.
Okay, look, we were there. We saw it all happen. As mentally as exhausted was at the end of the game, I felt like I had played in it, but I totally see your point, and I'm going to do my best to try and stop that. But as you mentioned, with Jalen Milroe, Alabama lost a lot of key pieces, and not just the players, but they also lost Nick Saban as well. However, surprisingly, Jalen Milroe decides to stay. He put up 192 passing yards in the SEC championship game last year, and naturally, questions have already come up about the game plan for Milroe. Here is Jalen Walker on playing Jalen Milroe.
I feel that we're currently right now we're focusing on ourselves for this week, but I can't wait to prepare for Bama. Going to that last year's game, like I said in the past, it left a bad taste in my mouth, and I can't wait to prepare to get ready for that game. I feel that just keeping him in his trap. He's a good quarterback. He's a good quarterback has legs and has vision down the field at the same time. Those are that's the new age of a quarterback coming to be in the NFL as well. So I feel like he has a great presence in the pocket. So getting that pressure and putting it on him, and helps the secondary a lot more.
Before Connor can mention it, let me just go ahead and say that, yes, this is the same Jalen Walker that had 2 sacks in last year's SEC championship game. But here's the thing about facing him this time around. I know that they had a lot of time to prepare for playing a quarterback like Jalen Milroe for the SEC championship. However, it's hard to prepare to face a quarterback like that. But now, this time, this is their second year playing him. Watching him on film is one thing. Experiencing the game against him is another. I do feel like this time, especially with no Isaiah Bond, I don't even want to give the Jermaine Burton plug on this show. I do feel like Georgia is going to be miles ahead of preparation and facing someone who's as good in the air and on the ground as Jalen Milroe.
Yeah, it's one of those things where, you can simulate the speed all you want in practice and have guys running around back there. But until you're out there chasing down Jalen Milroe, it's just a different thing. It's something you can't really prepare for. And we've talked at length on this show about how Georgia chose to attack Jalen Milroe last year. I think they were very mindful, very demure when it came to his athleticism and his ability to escape. And so they wanted to keep him in the pocket. I think that backfired. I think that they weren't aggressive enough last season. While, yes, Jalen Walker had 2 sacks, I think the bigger statistic in that game is Jalen Walker, who has proven already this season, and in my mind, he is Georgia's best front 7 defender, played only 12 snaps last year against that Alabama offense. That's way too low. It needs to be at least 3 times as big. It's not a school for ants. And so I think if you're this Georgia defense, with what you saw against Michigan last year, with what you saw against South Florida earlier this year, I think the way to impact Jalen Milroe is to get after him, to make him move quickly, to attack him, to speed him up a little bit. And if you get beat and give up an explosive run every once in a while, I think that's okay, because as we've seen, if you're able to pressure him as a passer and make him bail there, he can hold on to the football at times, and you have the athletes in a Jalen Walker, a Damon Wilson, potentially a Micah Williams if he's healthy enough to go, that can chase him down and force them into 3rd and longs. And I think that's where Georgia really wants to live. It wasn't where it was a season ago for Georgia, and that's a big reason why Alabama was able to upset Georgia in the SEC championship game last year.
I also feel like that when it comes to games like Alabama, you have to control the things that you're able to control. Last year in the SEC championship, one of the uncharacteristic-like things that happened is that Georgia had 5 penalties for 56 yards, including one that was a false start that made a 45-yard field goal go to a 50-yard field goal that Peyton Woodring missed. And last week in the Kentucky game, they had 8 penalties for 70 yards. If you're going to play well against a team like this in an environment like this, you have to minimize the mistakes that you have control over.
Right, Kaylee, and you look at when some of those penalties occurred. I know the Jalen Walker one was a soft as Sharman, but that extended a drive on third down. Malachi Starks had a holding penalty. That extended a drive on third down. Arian Smith was flagged for a block in the back when Georgia had a chance to run out the clock, and that's a reason why Kentucky was able to get the ball back. Fortunately, Georgia was able to get one last stop there and get out with the win. But penalties are up this season with Georgia. Part of that might be a new emphasis in the officiating and the way that they call games, but it's certainly something to monitor, especially in games like Georgia-Alabama, where the margins are this thin and you can't really give anything up in addition to what you're already doing out there.
I mean, all around, I think back to the videos that we did at the beginning of the season, all 5 of us said that this was the most important game in the regular season schedule, and you have to display in this game that now UGA is the SEC standard. It's not Alabama anymore. The Dragon has to be slayed, and I think that they need this win to give them the momentum they need to push through the rest of the season, Connor.
Right, they're coming off a poor game in Kentucky where just about everyone will tell you, both on the team and in the national media, that Georgia did not play its best. They're going to go on the road again in Alabama. It's going to be a hostile environment, a lot of eyeballs on that game. And so I think if you're Georgia, they know they have a chance to go out there and make a statement, not just that they're the team that looked more dominant against Clemson than what we saw against Kentucky, but at the end of the day, that in this new age of the SEC where it is 16 teams and Nick Saban is no longer present, that Georgia is proverbially the top dog there in the conference. And beating Alabama, in my mind, is going to go a long way to that, especially when you look at what Georgia has with the rest of the schedule. At Texas, against a Tennessee team that's been great so far. At Ole Miss, which has not allowed a touchdown yet. Georgia's going to need a win like this, given they've got some still difficult games ahead of them. And that Alabama is at Alabama for the number 4 team in the country makes this game all the bigger.
So in just a minute, we're going to discuss what happens with the offensive line now that Tate Ratledge is scheduled to be out until the Florida game. But first, we want to remind you that here on DawgNation, we are so excited to have Zagoria Law Firm as one of our partners, especially helping out with our Dog Bites segment. What we love about Zagoria Law Firm is that they are the only law firm in the state that specializes in representing people bitten by dogs. That's right, dog fans. They are the official dog bite injury lawyers of the Georgia Bulldogs. They literally wrote the book on how to win these cases. So if you or a loved one has been hurt by someone else's dog, make sure to give them a call at 833-GA-DOG-BITE. That's DOGBITE, or check them out on their website at ZagoriaLaw.com. Again, that's ZagoriaLaw.com. All right, let's talk about the offensive line here. I feel like over the summer, with having Tate Ratledge come back, Xavier Truss come back, we put the offensive line on this pedestal. Future Joe Moore winners potentially, just so much experience and depth at the position. And even before Tate went out, they were struggling. Has this offensive line met the expectations that we sort of had in place for them, Connor?
No, not at all. And they're not meeting their own expectations either. It's an offensive line that expects to be a difference maker, and it just hasn't been that so far this season. Part of that can be chalked up to the fact that I think they've played a great defensive line in Clemson. I think Deion Walker might be the best individual defensive lineman in college football. But that being said, Georgia's faced elite defensive lines before, and they haven't had this level of problem. I think Ernest Green has not played up to his potential at the left tackle spot. Obviously, Tate Ratledge leaving the game against Kentucky and now missing up to 6 weeks is a problem there as well. But I think the biggest issue, as Kirby Smart has outlined, comes with communication. And I think a lot of that falls on the plate of Jared Wilson, new center, taking over there. Cedric Van Pran Granger did a ton for this team in terms of identifying protections and calling things out. And this is Jared Wilson's first time as a starting center, and some of that verbiage and language and the ability to communicate is something that he's learning to have to do on the job, and a lot of that is falling back on Carson Beck now as well. And I think that's a big reason why the offensive line and Carson Beck in recent weeks haven't necessarily looked quite as dominant as we all expected them to.
Yeah, as we mentioned before, even without Tate, even with Tate, they still struggled in the beginning. Kirby Smart spoke about this. Here's what Coach Smart had to say about what went wrong versus Kentucky.
Communication would be one. When you look back at the game, there were some major communication errors there, talking about across the front, and communicating who we're working to, points and things like that, which some of that has to do with being on the road and crowd noise and everybody being on the same page, protecting the quarterback on some pressures that are really easy pickups. You look, our offensive line, when you look across the country in 3 years, it's hard to find teams that have cut one loose, like didn't block somebody. That's just, knock on wood, that's rare for us because we have a very experienced offensive line, and they see every pressure known to man from us. So that's something that we do usually well, pick those things up. And they really did that well in the game. There was a couple times we didn't, and we got to do a better job of that.
Here's the way I feel about this. I think I can understand and accept the miscommunication part because at the end of the day, I was there. I knew how loud it was, but also, too, it's early in the season, and those are still some of the factors that you have to work on and get better at. But I think the most surprising thing to me is that the miscommunication issues came at the hands of this group, has been together for a lot of time now and has some of the older players on the team who have been in these positions before. I think that was the most disappointing part, was that those issues came from this group.
Right. It's a group that we expected to be among, if not Georgia's biggest strength this season. And I think when you look on the offensive side of the ball right now, it's unquestionably their biggest weakness in terms of questions and what they're going to face. And now you go into Alabama, an equally, if not more, hostile environment. I mean, for all that Kentucky was, it wasn't a sold-out stadium, and there were plenty of Georgia fans there. I think when they go on the road to Alabama, Alabama's going to have grown men in the middle too. Tim Keenan, Jaheim Otis. They have really quality players in the interior of that defensive line, along with great players on the edge. And so this Georgia offensive line, quite frankly, just has to play better as a unit, as individuals. And that's going to be tough when you lose someone like Tate Ratledge, who is one of the best guards in America. But that we've spent so much time talking about the offensive line thus far, and none of it having to do with Tate Ratledge, I think speaks to just how concerning all of this is. Look, Micah Morris is going to be the guy that steps in for Tate Ratledge. He's a guy that's played a good amount of snaps and is now going to play more. But the issues with this Georgia offensive line weren't because of Tate Ratledge. And so when you remove him from the product, you have more questions and concerns about what you're going to see, starting with this Alabama game where they are going to once again be on the road and have to emphasize the importance of being able to communicate.
So let's talk about the Tate Ratledge injury for just a moment, because he's out with a sprained MCL and an ankle injury that required him to have tightrope surgery. But I have to admit, when we saw this happen with our own eyes on Saturday, I thought it was going to be way worse than this. I don't feel like this was worst case scenario necessarily.
Yeah, the fact that Georgia's going to get Tate Ratledge back at some point this season is a huge win for them because, again, like you said, Kaylee, I think when you see an offensive lineman get rolled up on in the manner in which Tate did, a lot of times that results in a torn ACL, and you would have absolutely hated that for Tate. But I think that Tate is going to do his damnedest to push back. He's rehabbed from injuries before, obviously having a foot injury that kept him out for all of the 2021 season. So he knows what this process looks like in terms of getting back onto the field there. These are, I think, ligament-type damages. You know, obviously the knee with the sprained MCL. That's usually better for an offensive lineman. I think the tightrope is one to watch, but a key difference given last year we saw Amarius Mims. It took him quite some time to come back. We're not going to see the same level of is he going to want to play, is he going to want to push back that we saw with Amarius Mims that I think we will with Tate Ratledge. I know Tate Ratledge wants to be out there on the field. It's why he came back to Georgia for another season, and why I think if you're a Georgia fan, while yes, you're right to be worried about this injury and him pushing back and coming back from it, I think we're going to see Tate Ratledge on the field as soon as he feels comfortable doing so, because it does mean that much to him to be out on the field and represent this program and lead this Georgia offensive line. So
clearly the big question that this leads us into is, with Tate Ratledge out, what happens next? Here's what Coach Smart had to say about it.
Well, we play Micah a lot, right? So we have three guards that play. That's why we do that, because there's a chance of injury, and we play three guys. So I didn't see a lot different from him going out. Micah stepped in and played. Micah probably had to play more than he typically does, and he and Dylan did a good job.
Yeah, so the good thing is that we have a lot more depth at the offensive line than we do the defensive line. We saw Michael Morris get a lot of snaps in the game, as well as Dylan Fairchild, who had one of the top PFF grades for Georgia in this last game against Kentucky. But Connor, like, what really has to happen now? Who really has to be the person that steps up, not just from the physical aspect of the game, but also the leadership that Tate Ratledge brings to this offensive line?
Yeah, I think Micah Morris is going to be fine stepping in there. He's played a lot. They're going to get him in shape and ready to go. I think that's the guy you see on your screen right there, Jared Wilson. Like, Dylan Fairchild is a stud, rock solid left guard. He's going to do a lot of things for you. But there's a lot of pressure right now on Jared Wilson. You lose a guy in Tate Ratledge who has seen everything. There are questions about your ability to communicate things to the rest of the line, about what Carson Beck is seeing at the line of scrimmage. I think Jared Wilson could do a better job of helping him out. Not to mention that there were issues in the snaps in that game against Kentucky. I know Carson Beck dropped one late in that game. I think that is more on Carson. But there was one early in that game where it just went off of Carson's shin, and there's not a whole lot he could have done there. Your job, first and foremost, as a center is to make sure you get the snap right. And so he's got to focus on that first. And look, there's a lot on Jared Wilson's plate. It was his first ever start in an SEC road environment. It's understandable that someone might not have their best game in that day. But when you go on the road against Alabama, you're going to need Jared Wilson to step up and play significantly better, in my opinion, than what he showed against Kentucky.
All right, we won't harp on this too much, but I do feel like it's important to bring up. Tate Ratledge was also taking snaps in practice as a backup center, but he can't do that now. Who kind of steps into that backup center role?
It's firmly Drew Bobo at this point in time. I think Drew Bobo's played really well in the game against Tennessee Tech. He had the viral block there, and is someone that Georgia is learning to trust a little bit more and feel a little bit more comfortable with him, not just as the backup center, but potentially in the game there as well if something were to happen to Jared Wilson. Obviously, Tate Ratledge going out forces some of that, but I do think that Drew Bobo now has earned that second string center job and will step in if needed to against Alabama.
Here's the thing. Kentucky, it's over, done with. I'm sure they've watched the tape a million times, but if the offensive line wants to prove that they're as good as we have believed they've been all summer, then it's going to have to be done in this Bama game versus an opponent where it's going to be more even at the line of scrimmage.
Right, and you think back to last year's Alabama game, I think the offensive line was a huge story in that game. Amarius Mims goes down early, and that fundamentally changed what Georgia tried to do on the offensive side of the ball there. They found some answers late, but the offensive line, I think, got pushed around that day. And while, yes, Dallas Turner and Justin Ingabonemi are not on that Alabama team anymore, you do still have some studs there up front. And so I think that's going to be a major matchup to watch. How do those edge players of Alabama match up against Ernest Green on the left side, Xavier Truss, and Monroe Freeling on the right side?
All right, DawgNation, I want to remind you guys that if you like what we do here on DawgNation at Large, make sure to like this video and subscribe to our DawgNation YouTube page. We've gotten all the serious stuff done, but bye week is ultimately about having some fun. So why don't we have some fun here on DawgNation at Large and do our meme machine?
Who's that coming down the track? Who's that coming down the track? It's a meme machine and red and black. It's a meme machine and red and black. Go, no!
You remember what happened last time you were on your phone, right?
I'm looking at memes. It's the segment, right? We're supposed to be looking at memes here.
Okay. I think we're going to need an expert consultant to back me up on this.
We will allow it in this segment only. Only in this segment we will allow Connor to be on his phone.
Well, with that, we will let Connor go first on his meme machine pick. Walk us through it.
Yeah, my first meme machine pick takes us to Stillwater, Oklahoma this week. You've got Oklahoma State taking on the Utah Utes. The combined age in this game is 49 years old. I would point out that both starting quarterbacks for these teams, Cam Rising for Utah, Alan Bowman for Oklahoma State, are older than our own Kaylee Mansell here. Some people are calling this the big game of the week. Big ranked matchup there. That the winner of this game, I think, could very well win the Big 12. I call this the join the workforce bowl because
Yeah.
these guys are both 7th-year seniors. You're not a doctor. You're a college football player. I get that you want to keep playing. I get that COVID has granted these guys and injuries as well an extra season. But these guys are needed to go out there and join the real world instead of living in college and living in the past.
Yeah, how about instead of like a trophy or something, the loser of this game, the starting quarterback, has to immediately go get a job?
Yeah.
Mom and dad kicking you off the insurance, all of that stuff. I love, what's the deal with the mustache? Both of them look like they're like cheesy villains coming out in some
they're
kind of
old.
thing. The Okie State quarterback, I'm like, is he going to pull out a saber at some point and want a sword fight? What's going on with these two?
Mustaches are in for older men, and these guys clearly represent that demo.
The Utah quarterback had to get them just for men. He's covering up some grays in there. Love that. All right. Whose turn is it next? Me?
Yeah, Cody, you got it.
All right. Mine is an audio meme, so let us hear from Marshall head coach Charles Huff.
Would love to have some of those guys from Ohio State too. So if they want to transfer on down, we've got a Tudor's Biscuit NIL, all you can eat. So if any of those guys that run really, really fast at Ohio State like Tudor's Biscuits, I promise you, all you can eat all day if you transfer here. So, but yeah.
Well, they take 39-year-olds. We're talking about old football players. I'll be up there if the Thundering Herd. I will be even more thundering if I can get all-you-can-eat biscuits. I love that. So they're playing Ohio State, obviously, this week, and they asked him about the players. He said, come on down. We don't have money, but we got biscuits. What would you guys get paid in if you had to go somewhere on an NIL deal?
Ooh.
Pizza. Easy.
Coffee.
Love pizza.
Coffee.
Coffee NIL deal. All you can drink?
Spend most of my money on it anyway. It definitely probably saved me $20 million over time.
I love it. All right, Kaylee, you're up.
All right. I'm excited to bring up this one. This one comes from John Tweets Sports. So it's a quote tweet. The initial tweet says that ESPN now projects Georgia to lose multiple games this season. And the quote tweet says, the national media is finally catching up to what we've been saying. Georgia is going 7-5, and not like Centel 7-5. When the media is saying that Georgia's going 7-5, it's going to be another national championship. Only like a very niche amount of people in the Georgia audience and Georgia fan base get this, but the ones who understand it, I want to be friends with you.
Yeah,
I don't know if this is necessarily I don't know if this is a niche tweet. I think Georgia fans are well aware of the fact that Nolan Smith, after Georgia went 15-0 and won a national championship, was telling everyone in the locker room, they were saying we were going 7-5 that year. I think that's a well-known fact among Georgia fans.
I feel like it has to be people that keep up with a certain amount of the media, not just people that like just watch and turn on games, but people who actually go out of their way to keep up with all the other stuff outside of the field. So you got to give credit to these people, Connor.
There were people in that tweet responding who were very serious. No, I'm thinking maybe 2 losses max.
Exactly. I think the first tweet underneath it, like the first reply was like, I don't know, I actually think it might be like an 8-4 season. So give credit where credit is due.
No, the media didn't predict them to go 8-4 though. We said 7-5.
Right. All right. So we get a bonus this week is what you're telling me, guys?
Yeah. Okay. So here's the backstory. I would love to know the specific stat line of how many tweets are put out in a day, but when we send these, we send them to Cody, and funny enough, Connor and I actually sent the same one, so we each did our backup ones, but this is the one that we collectively agreed was the greatest of the week, obviously coming from one of the greatest sports movies of all times, Remember the Titans. Kirby at 4 a.m. Monday morning. When I saw this, all I could think about was like, is it still fun? Are you still having fun? It's not fun no more, is it?
Left side, strong side here. This bye week was something I think that Kirby Smart was looking forward to, based both on how they played against Kentucky and also getting back to the fundamentals and blitzing all night like they need to against Alabama in a week.
Yeah, there was going to be some penalty runs or 2 or 3 or 4, 8 for 95 yards or whatever it was. Yeah, there was plenty to work on this week. There's no sitting by the pool, relaxing, getting extra cold tub time this week.
Yeah, from now on, you drop a pass, you run a mile.
Yep.
I like it. I'm down with it.
All right, with that, we've had some great bye week memes this week. But since it's bye week, I think it's one of those times that it's perfect to do yet another Connor Kaylee Showdown.
am excited for this one. We're going to have Cody ref it per usual.
Presto
Quick change, Cody.
Record timing.
I'm available for halftime shows at college basketball games.
All right, so a lot of things needed to be done this week for Georgia in terms of the bye week, and so that is what inspired this week's Connor Kaylee Showdown. It's the things that you should accomplish during the bye week on Saturday. Can go a lot of ways, and I would like to let Connor go first before Connor says anything. Cody, do you have anything that you would like to add? Any judging criteria?
No, I just want to hear, somebody make a great argument, the things I need to accomplish, me or everybody, the royal we, need to accomplish on a bye week. So, since you deferred, we'll let Connor go first.
Yeah, I guess there's no coin flip this time around. We're trying to already change the rules and the setup of the way things do here, but I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go out there and play and do my best. And here's the thing that you should be doing this weekend. Nothing. Nothing at all. Do whatever you feel like doing. This is a nothing weekend. There is no Georgia game. Do not feel pressure to do anything. If your wife wants you to go apple picking or your husband wants you to go to the hardware store, you can say, no, I don't want to do that. I'm just going to sit here and enjoy the weekend to myself. If you feel motivated to sit down and watch some garbage SEC games like Florida, Mississippi State, feel free to do that. This is your weekend off as well. Look, as Georgia showed against Kentucky, these games can be plenty of stressful and are not always for the faint of heart. That game against Alabama is going to be a 4-quarter knockdown, drag-out war. It's going to be a long day as well if you're out there tailgating or enjoying a Saturday out there. Do absolutely nothing with your weekend this weekend. Enjoy it. There's no Georgia game. There's nothing for you to stress or fret about. And so my advice for you, if you're a Georgia fan out there this weekend, do nothing at all.
All right, Connor, I'm very good at doing nothing. All right, Kaylee, what you got?
First off, that is the most Connor Riley response that I have ever heard in the history of ever. Do you think that's what Georgia's doing right now, Connor? You think they're just sitting around doing nothing after what happened at Kentucky? No, they're getting things done. They're working on the things that needed to be done to set them up for success in the future, and that's what the bye week is all about. Look, I'm in full respect of do nothing with your time. I get that. I love sitting around and doing nothing. But as someone who is also on the bye week, this is my time of the year to go ahead and take care of the things that I need to get done. Number one, it's a great time to get back to the personal relationships that you have neglected since the start of college football. Hit up your friends, hit up your family, get those phone calls out of the way, go to dinner with your friends, play pickleball, do something, reach back out and let them know, hey, I'm sorry that we haven't talked over the last month. We're still cool. Love you guys. Make sure to call somebody that you haven't talked to since the start of college football. Also, you've got to get that one chore done that you've been putting off for like the entire year. For me, that was cleaning out my closet. The dopamine rush that you're going to get after you've gotten this thing done that you have dreaded doing over the last year, you're going to feel good about yourself going into the weekend. Start a new show with your significant other, with your friend. Perhaps maybe Below Deck Mediterranean. That's a good one to start. Give yourself something to look forward to. And finally, Saturday morning, Connor said that you can watch Florida, Mississippi State. Don't do that. You're wasting an early morning to do something way better than watching that show of a game. And yeah, I said it because that's what it is. We can put a bleep over it, whatever. You can do so many other things. Go to brunch. Go to the farmer's market. Get something to make for dinner that night. Do not waste your Saturday morning watching literally what might be one of the worst matchups of all time. Do as the Dogs would do this week and get stuff done in your bye week and thank me for it later.
Woo! Woo! I'm exhausted just listening to all the things Kaylee had for me. So we got Connor saying do nothing and like it. Kaylee saying get about 17 things done.
Yeah.
So, a couple notes. Kaylee knows me. Below Deck Med, Captain Sandy. It's a guilty pleasure of mine. Could we be watching that? Yeah, maybe this weekend we could. Would you start a new show? We're in the middle of an 8-game SEC stretch here. I'm not sure I'm going to get time to catch up on that show. I do like what Kaylee said, though, about personal relationships. Have I seen my children on a Saturday the last month? No. Should I probably see them again? Yes, so I will have to see them. So it can't exactly be doing nothing. But when I look at it on a bye weekend, the arguments that were made, Kaylee, I think when you got to Eminem and tonight you're cleaning out your closet, it was just too much. It's too much for me, too much stuff to do. So as a person who may be just lazy, I'm going to say do nothing. So Connor will get the win tonight as we take a look at the scoreboard. Connor now up 5-3 in Connor Kaylee Showdown.
Thank you, Cody. Look, Kaylee made some great points there, but I think the big thing, she made too many points. At a certain point, it came from getting stuff done to like a laundry list of things that you need to get done, and that just causes more anxiety. Like, look, if you want to sit around and do nothing and watch Below Deck Mediterranean, that's great. If you want to play and hang out with your children, I consider that doing nothing as well. Don't feel stress and pressure to go out there and accomplish things. You know, you put it down, you put it out there in the world. That creates anxiety. You don't need any anxiety this weekend. Doing nothing is the perfect way to enjoy this bye week.
I have to say, I'm usually one to give credit where credit is due, and I will accept a loss if I feel like I deserved it. But I think this is the worst outcome that we've ever had in a Connor Kaylee Showdown, specifically because doing these things are what help prevent anxiety in the future. You guys are all thinking in the short term. I'm thinking in the long term. I'm playing chess. You guys are playing checkers here. I'm coming at both of you because, like I said, you think the dogs are sitting around doing nothing? No.
I think the question comes up as it's come up on this show, are we Georgia? And if you are Georgia and complaining about the referees, actually it's kind of par for the course right now. More issues with the officiating, so that sounds about right. That's okay. You can hate us. We're just trying to do our
Georgia
jobs.
says, be where your feet are. This is the bye weekend. Be exactly where you are.
That's fine. So when I get all my stuff done this weekend and feel great and you guys are sitting there on Sunday thinking I should have done more, he'll be the real winner then.
Still us, because we did nothing.
All right. Let's go ahead and end the show how we usually would. I learned that you guys are a bunch of lazy bums. Connor, take it away.
Wow, I learned that Kaylee is a sore loser.
Like I said, I'm cool, but I truly feel like I won this. That's all I'm saying.
Complaining about the officiating is a textbook definition of loser behavior, and I thought you were better than that.
It just told me more about the two of you. I honestly had higher expectations from both of you, I guess.
Here's the beauty of it. We got a comment section. So everybody let us know. If we got it wrong, maybe we can go a little VAR under review and we can take a look at it next week. But for right now, it's Connor up 5-3.
All right. Well, with that, we'll go ahead and wrap up DawgNation at Large. Do whatever you want this weekend. Get things done. Do nothing. I would recommend the first option, but at the end of the day, it's up to you, DawgNation. Thanks for tuning in. We'll see you right back here next Thursday at 7 o'clock.